Welcome back, everyone. We're back from our lunch break. And next, we're going to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Linton. This next panel is going to be system operators. And they've all put together presentations that have lots of photographs and even a video. And Jeff, I think it's possible that we're not going to pick up the sound on the video. That's just a possibility. I'll see what I can do around that, though, to get it's not just the video, getting the video to work, but the sound with it. So Jeff Linton is the president of the Beverage Container Management Board. He is a highly skilled executive manager, coach, and mentor with a proven track record of delivering influential leadership as well as operational excellence and efficiency in a broad range of business environments. After a career of more than 15 years in the hospitality industry, Jeff's service-based skills took on an environmental focus when he landed in the beverage container industry, managing at an operational level. With that, I'll say, welcome, Jeff. Jeff, are you unmuted? I'm not hearing you yet. Okay, I think there's a potentially a problem with your microphone.
Okay, how are we?
That's better. Keep going.
Good stuff. Okay, we're ready to go.
Yes, there we go.
Okay, if we don't end up being able to show that video or have the sound, the sound is quite relevant to the video, so we've got permission to post it on your website, and I would encourage everybody to follow up afterwards if they could. Let me get through the rest of the slides first, though. This should get us well ahead of schedule if we can't play video. But thank you, Susan, to yourself and your team for together. I think this is a really good alternative to meeting in person, and probably something that might look a lot more like the norm going forward for the next few months anyway. I think we can learn a lot from this experience, and so far for me it's been very positive. I look forward to the afternoon. I'll ask you to switch slides. My brief presentation will quickly 4 areas. There's going to be 18 slides, and it'll take me approximately 11 minutes, including the video, which is another 4 minutes if we can. I'll cover the organizational structure of our system and how it functions, as well as the results and benefits of a triple bottom line. Next slide, please. First, I wanted to start by showing everybody a little bit of a sample of what we here in Alberta work to protect every day. So this is a big incentive for us, and so that we know what we're looking for in terms of outcomes and protecting that environment. Next slide, please. The regulation was originally drafted in 1971 here in Alberta, passed in 1972 as a Litter Control Act. It changed focus somewhat during the 80s and 90s and was often referred to as a waste diversion or waste management legislation. Today, however, I believe we need to see it as a resource management. And in my personal opinion, that if we are going to be successful at this, we need to stop referring to anything we target as waste. Next slide. Just a few things I will draw your attention to in this image. Our industry has 3 primary stakeholders. We refer to it as a 3-legged stool. We work very collaboratively together, but we are in the center there as a Beverage Container Management Board. We are an oversight organization created as a delegated administrative body under the legislation. Collection system agent is the manufacturer's representative for all one-way containers, and the association representing return centers. In our case, in Alberta, we call them depots, and the BCMB, who is the oversight organization, make up that 3-legged stool. The second point here that if you'll note the green circles in the top left, all good DRS draw a distinction between the consumer who paid the deposit and the person who may be presenting it to a depot for the receipt of that same deposit. The third is that while we are an administrative organization delegated by the government of Alberta, our regulation does not give us authority over manufacturers or retailers directly, but depends on a voluntary compliance and collaborative relationship with them through their agent. Next slide. I'm happy to dive in with anyone who wants to learn more about our system, but let me touch on 4 key attributes that I think define success for Alberta. We've heard it a few times already today, but unredeemed deposits and material recycling revenue remain in the system to help fund it. There is no sheeting from the government, and in my opinion, a sheeting where money is drawn, whether it be the unredeemed deposits into government, actually it's a disincentive for higher return rates and will likely thwart some of the higher success rates that we need to achieve in order to attribute or benefit from a circular economy. All participants must be paid fairly for the work they do. In our case, they are. There is no subsidization of the system from other business elements, such as retail or return to retail. The BCMB serves an independent oversight body to the most of the commercial contracts that drive the system forward in Alberta, and we all work hard at keeping the information created by the deposits secure. We have to remember that DRS, or Deposit Return Schemes, sell money. Alberta's system is an annual economy of over $350 million, and it definitely needs to be protected. For context, our population in Alberta is 4 million people. Next slide, please. DRS are simple. I'll make a caveat here, though. I've been in the industry. I'm in my 30th year now in this industry, and without fail, every single person that's come into this industry has commented within a few weeks of how complicated it actually is on the inside. But I think from the perspective of a DRS, they can be very simple in terms of their structure, and manufacturers register their containers. The system facilitates the return of those containers from the public, and everyone works to report on their share of the activity. And that, in a nutshell, produces results, and we happen to produce extraordinary results here in Alberta. Slide, please. The cost of our system to the recycling consumer is the lowest in Canada. Our return rate is the highest, and our return rate of plastic containers is arguably the highest in North America. I have a bit more information on this in my section on performance reporting. Next slide, please. I won't go into a lot of detail here. It's been well by some of the earlier speakers this morning, including Sarah's information was very detailed and very helpful. I'll maybe make 3 primary points here. Our system is funded by three different categories of revenue. One, as I've mentioned, is unredeemed deposits. One is the recycle it, or the scrap value of the material when it's recycled. And third revenue is up by what we call a container recycling fee that the manufacturers either pay on their own, or they add on at the till to the retail transaction price that the consumer pays. Most of the one-way containers in Alberta have a CRF visible on it, so when you walk into the grocery store or the small convenience store, you would pay your fund for the container, the beverage itself, and you would see the 10-cent deposit, and then you would see the CRF on top of that. On average, our system spends about $2.50 per household per month on that CRF. So that, to me, is a price tag that can be used in some of the benchmarking that Sarah was putting for costs of systems and savings to other areas, such as the Blue Box Collection Program or the MRFs that are handling less material. It's important to note here that this is a fee that's paid by the consumer and not the taxpayer, and there is a distinction there because for those consumers who do not choose to consume the beverages, there is no cost to them. And the volume is up, but the revenue is down in terms of the overall cost of a Blue Box program. Now, I say revenue is up because in our situation in Alberta, and this is a very important thing for us when we went through a transition in 2009 of introducing dairy containers into our system, and at the same time the deposit went up, that revenue actually went up in the municipal context of their MRFs, because some deposit containers continue to arrive through the recycling program and the value of those containers coming through their program when they're diverted back through a deposit return scheme is far and away greater than the value of those same commodity scrap materials. So in the case of Calgary and of Edmonton, their reported revenue actually went up as a result of the transition. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of sense of what we're talking about in terms of performance here, and I'm going to cover each of the three different areas of environmental, social, and economic performance, and in our opinion produces a win-win-win for Albertans. Our system is currently capturing about 80% of sales, with some outstanding performances by some material streams and some average performances by some of the material streams. Give you a bit more insight into this, about half of our system is aluminum, 1/3 is plastic, and about 1/8 is glass. Next slide, please. I'm going to go quickly through the next 3 slides, but I have put them in to make a point. A well-designed and managed DRS can exceed the highest standards of performance anywhere in the world for the vast majority of containers, including aluminum. Next. Glass. Next. And refillable containers. Next. Now this one may be a bit of a surprise to some of you. As I mentioned, dairy is in our system. This is a flagship container for dairy's distribution in Alberta, the 1, 2, and 4 liter HTPE jugs. The dairy industry is in a bit of a crisis at the moment as they evaluate the state of the world's acceptance of plastic anything, since one of their product packages have some amount of plastic in them at present. Most of the Alberta's milk is sold in one of these different size of containers. This material stream in our system currently has a 92% return rate. So before your local dairy runs from plastic, they may want to consider the closed loop system such as BRS for exceeding the best environmental standards and promoting a circular economy. Next slide. I mentioned the size of our economy, but that same economy also produces more than 3,100 jobs in 165 communities in Alberta and pays taxes on more than 100,000 square feet of commercial space. And for context, again, that's one job for every 1,000 people in our population, or roughly 1 FTE for about every 1,800 people. Slide. Here's where it gets close to home for me. Roughly 10% of our economy flows through the hands of provincial and local charities. From McDonald House, the local swim club, or the homeless, there is more than $30 million, or 10% of our system, that would have to be raised some other way if they could not do bottle drives. For the next 4 minutes, if we can get the video, I want to play for you that ties most of our system together. As I mentioned, we use a depot model with no return to retail. This way we can serve a population of about 80,000 people with only 2 depots. The footprint is small and the cost is low on a per unit basis. I am the first to admit that the depot model has its challenges, but if depots are run well and support the charitable components of our network well, it can be a poster for the community and deposit return schemes everywhere. Let's see if we can hear this video.
Okay, Jeff, we're going to give it a try.
Thank you.
Pollution of any sort is concerning. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue worldwide. What we do here we feel is important, and it goes a long ways, taking those small steps that will lead to bigger steps in keeping our environment clean. My name is Brenda Smith. I'm the Business Services Director for Signature Support Services. We're at Plus One Bottle Depot, and we're located in Grand Prairie, Alberta in Canada. We started doing business with Tomer approximately 4 years ago. We were looking for some technology that we knew would make our operations more efficient. They sent up some engineers and they spent quite a bit of time at our depot. They came back to us with several designs actually, and over time we determined which one would suit our needs best. They spent time with all of our staff, walked them through the whole process, gave them an opportunity to actually experience, run orders through, so that when we opened up on the first day, we were just ready to go.
At first, I guess people didn't feel very comfortable, but after training, it was like, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. So much better and faster than counting everything by hand.
I find that the equipment makes it more easy on our staff, and so they're able to be more friendlier and to have the small conversations with the customers.
There's been a huge change in the customers. They're so enthralled with what we're doing and the speed in which everything is done. They're more than happy to bring their recycling in now.
When I came to Plus One, it was a nice, well-oiled machine. Somehow none of the bottles got jammed up or nothing, so that was pretty slick.
We really like it here. I've found that it's a lot brighter here and faster.
It's very convenient. Get in and out of here very fast.
The people that are working there are always friendly and they're always ready to serve.
I trust the systems counting my containers correctly. With technology this day and age, it's hard to have errors.
I would recommend Plus One to others. It's a much more pleasant experience and the kids actually have a lot of fun.
My favorite thing about the technology is just watching it. It is so streamlined. It goes from the front end to the back end. Through that process, it gets counted and sorted, and then it's on its way. It's quick, it's efficient, and it just makes our job so much easier.
I find the TOMRA support group, they are very good.
Any issues we have, we pick up the phone. They either walk us through the maintenance or what is the issue, or they resolve it from their end.
Knowing that there's somebody there to provide that support for us, that's what we like most about TOMRA. Using the TOMRA system has allowed us to provide more hours of service to the residents of Grand Prairie at less cost to us, therefore increases our bottom line.
The biggest advantage is our customers and our staff being more happy to be here. Less tired, more excited, not so nervous.
We're very proud of what we do here. It allows us to take that step to protect the environment as well as give great service to the community of Grand Prairie. Just in closing, I guess I would just like to thank the TOMRA personnel. They have been totally invested with us in this project. We have every confidence that they will continue to stay invested with us.
Okay, I hope that everyone can hear me and that I can introduce Jules. Can Bonnie and Karen, can you confirm that you can hear me? Yes, okay, good. Jules, I hope you're out there. And I apologize for the way that the video seemed to take over my computer and I had to get things restarted. Jules, I'm just going to introduce you real quickly and I hope you can you see the slides, everyone? Okay, very good. Jules is the Chief Stewardship Officer and Director of External Relations for Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative, also known as OBRC. As the CSO, Jules is responsible for charting the future of bottle bill implementation and ensuring the deposit and redemption system remains convenient, relevant, and effective for Oregonians. I do want to make a little program note here on the availability of the full bios of the speakers and the agenda for today, because you all have given us feedback that I was speaking in error when I said that they can be found on our website. Indeed, they are on our website, but not in a way that's easy to find at all. And for those of you who are already subscribers to our weekly headlines newsletter, you can go into the weekly headlines newsletter that came out on Friday and click on the link there, and that will take you to the agenda and the bios. And once we're done with today's presentations, we will put the bios and the agenda in a place on the website where everybody can find it, as well as all of these other materials. So sorry for that note taking up a little bit of time there, Jules. Jules, please take it away.
No worries. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound fantastic. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to do this. I also have a couple of embedded videos. Hopefully they work and they aren't on a loop. You're going to hear some very similar themes to OnCorp and then a few things that are slightly different. And I think the order of the presentations has done a great job of teeing up these systems in the context of the principles that we've discussed earlier, of having unredeemed deposits supporting the system, of having a single operator in the state, of having a system that has convenience at its core. And that's really what the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative, what our bottle drop model is about. It's about providing convenience to customers through our bottle drop locations, and then as well through a return to retail portion of it. And you'll see that we've combined what we feel are kind of the best of some different approaches into our model. But the overall thing to keep in mind is that our system is the only system in the United States that is entirely run by industry, privately run by industry, through one central system operator. And that will be, I think, evident through this presentation. So hopefully on the next slide, the video works. And this is a news report. Oh, it is not there. Okay. So we've had some great news reports on our system, and I think have done a very good job of explaining it. I'll explain a little bit more here since the video is not there. The bottle bill was signed into law in 1971. We were the first bottle bill in the United States shortly after British Columbia in Canada. It was originally 5 cents just on beer and soda, and remained pretty much that way until 2009 when water came in, disrupted the model that we had, and OBRC was created as a cooperative of distributors to privately manage the system throughout the state. In 2010 and 2011, we introduced the Redemption Center program, our depots. 2016, we started planning our reusable bottle program. 2017, we increased to 10 cents, which really changed the system. And then we expanded the containers to basically everything except liquor, wine, and milk. And then we launched our reusable program as well. So as you can tell from this, there's been a lot of change in a short amount of time. And Oregon has done a lot to modernize its bottle bill over the last few years. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the change from 5 to 10 cents was really the sea change that we saw. We were at about 64%. In fact, right before the deposit changed, we were actually even lower. We were bottoming out around 58% redemption, and then immediately overnight went to 82%. These are actually photos I took at one of our redemption centers of lines out the door on 10-cent day with people bringing their families and children in to return their bottles and cans. And we've actually seen that redemption rate continue to climb. The statewide average, when you look at some of the on-premise sales that are coming back that's lower, is lower than 90%. But for OBRC, for our bottle drop system, well, we're now actually above 90% redemption on a statewide basis. And we continue to see growth in interest in returns. Next slide, please. I mentioned we also expanded our beverage types. We have now brought in everything except liquor, wine, and milk. And there will likely be legislation next session to bring in, at a minimum, wine in cans, potentially all wine, and cocktails in cans. The reason wine has not been in the bottle bill was for some technical reasons. Those have been solved. So there is not really a barrier moving forward. And a lot of the wine industry actually would like to be in the bottle bill. Believe it or not, they are asking for it. And on the liquor issue, it's a peculiarity with our state law and state distribution and ownership of liquor bottles, but we are starting to figure out some ways around that to bring in all the rest of the beverages into the bottle bill. Next slide, please. So who are we? We're Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative. We are a cooperative corporation. We are a not-for-profit cooperative. We are not actually a 501c3. We are a cooperative corporation where our members hold our shares, essentially. And we process almost all of the containers for the state of Oregon. There are a couple of distributors that are not members, very small distributors in rural areas, but we cover all the rest of the distributors for the state of Oregon. In Oregon, the responsibility for the bottle bill is placed upon distributors. And our membership are both pure distributors as well as hybrid distributors. Distributors like a hybrid distributor would be potentially a retail distributor such as a Kroger or a Costco that is also a retailer and has their own private label, as well as manufacturer distributors like Anheuser-Busch InBev, that is a manufacturer as well as a distributor. Anybody who is a distributor of any kind can be a member of OBRC, and as you can see on this slide, we have a lot of members and participants, over 200, and we currently have about 500 employees serving all of them. So we manage the entire system on their behalf. We do all the pickup and processing, we service all the machines, we do all of the sale of the scrap material, we operate the redemption centers, and we manage all the finances and deposits. We do not receive any taxpayer money whatsoever to do this. And our budget is actually quite simple. We don't have any fees or taxes that support us. The way we work is, fees on customers or consumers. The way we work is we determine our budget for the following year. We look at projected returns, and then we also project unredeemed deposits. We get to keep unredeemed deposits. We then subtract unredeemed deposits from our total budget. We then go to our membership, which has approved our budget, and we then divvy up the remainder of the budget beyond unredeemed deposits amongst our membership as fees, and that's what supports our budget. It's quite simple. So in 2019, for example, we had a $44 million operating budget. We had somewhere around 19 million in unredeemed deposits. So we had about $25 million in fees that we divvied up amongst our members, and they paid in. Then we sell our scrap on the open market in most cases, and then we return that scrap revenue directly to our members, proportional to the type and volume of containers that they put in. So they do receive a dividend. We do not keep any of the scrap value for our operations. We rely solely on unredeemed deposits and member fees. And the member fees that are paid in proportional to the volume, type, and size of containers that a distributor is selling into the marketplace. Next slide, please. So this is our flagship. This is a Bottle Drop Redemption Center. They are always this clean and sparkly, I promise. And we operate 25 of these flagship centers around the state. We're currently constructing another one, and we have a few more that are coming online. Next slide, please. So the dimes, the customer pays their dime. The retailer has already paid that dime to the distributor. The distributor has forwarded it back to OBRC. The customer then essentially reimburses the retailer when they purchase their beverage. Then the customer can return their container to a bottle drop or to a retailer and then receive their dime back that comes from OBRC either via the retailer or directly through bottle drop. And that circular system is very simple for dimes. We don't have any of the other fees or payments in the system. There are no handling fees in the Oregon model. It is simply a circle of dimes. There's also no mechanism by which retailers can opt out unless they are in the convenience zone of a bottle drop. So when a bottle drop is placed, there is a 2 to 3 mile convenience zone placed around that bottle drop. And within that zone, retailers are exempt from some or all take back. If they're not in a bottle drop zone, they must continue to take back 144 containers per person per day if they are above 5,000 square feet. And that requirement can only be waived by the governor in a major emergency such as is happening right now through COVID-19. Next slide, please. Within our bottle drops, we try to make these as convenient as possible. There's lots of ways for people to return, 3 primary ways in these locations. And our largest bottle drop center on Gleason Street in Portland accepts about 100 million containers per year. We believe that makes it the largest by volume depot in the world. We have not seen any evidence to suggest otherwise. We tend to process through the 25 full service centers on average, probably around 50 or 60 million containers a year. We also have other locations that are express or DRC locations. I'll get into those in a second. Next slide, please. So you can either use the self-serve reverse vending machines, put your container in which case they're automatically put onto a conveyor belt and then flattened and compacted in the back. There's no sorting by brand or any of that other kind. They're only sorted by material type. Or for many of our customers, they prefer the green bag option. You'll hear from Clink next. Clink invented in the United States this green bag option. We license it from them. And in the green bag option, the customer signs up for an account. They get a bottle drop card and a series of stickers with their code on it. You simply fill up your bag, tag it, and drop it in one of our drop doors, either at a redemption center or at an express or DRC, a dealer redemption center location. Then we sort it, count it, credit your account. Next slide, please. You can use that money in a number of different ways. You can also use the Blue Bag program. The Blue Bag program is for nonprofits. They can collect containers directly and have that money directly contributed to the nonprofit. Last year, we did over $1 million in donations through this program to nonprofits. Next slide, please. This is one of our express locations where you can drop. This is a modified shipping container that's solar powered. This is in a rural area in a grocery store parking lot. Next slide, please. We also have urban locations that are built into the bottle rooms. These are drop doors that are owned and maintained by OBRC. There are kiosks in the breezeways of the retailers, and you can purchase your bags, print your tickets, and manage your account right from the retail location. So you can drop your bag and then go in and do your shopping. Retailers really like this program quite a bit. They ask us for it. We can't keep up with demand, and we're building more every day. We have 7 in development right now. And then starting this month, we opened our first 2 dealer redemption centers, which is a slightly different model. It is very much like this, except it's branded by the retailer, not by Bottle Drop. And then a dealer redemption center model, it is free for the customer to drop off a bag. There's a 40-cent processing fee if you drop your bag at a redemption center or at a Bottle Drop Express location. And if you drop it at a dealer redemption center, the store pays your processing fee on your behalf. But as a result, that store can drop from 144 containers per person per day unbagged to 24 containers per person per day unbagged. It gives the store the incentive to accept those bag drops and pay the processing fee on behalf of the customer. So that becomes a free drop for the customer, and people are really excited about this. Stores are really excited about it as well too, and we'll look forward to trying to keep up with demand on that. The 40-cent processing fee offsets the higher cost of sorting and crediting in the system, but that processing fee is 40 cents on a bag that is generally worth about $7. So it's only 4 containers out of that, 70 containers. And in addition, if you use your green bag funds in store for grocery credit, you get a 20% bonus on your balance. So a $7 bag, you get an extra $1.40 in credit for in-store credit. So you're actually coming out $1 ahead, even if you were paying the processing fee. Next slide, please. Once you have your account, you can also use it for other things. I mentioned the 20% more. You can also donate your balance to any charity or your kid's school. And then starting last year, we now have the ability to link your Bottle Drop account to your Oregon 529 college savings plan, and you can set it up for automatic investment in your child's 529 or in any 529 that's available, and have that money saved for college. Next slide, please. So we currently have about 415,000 account holders. You can see on this slide that blue tag is a tag for our Gleason Redemption Center. Every little blue dot around that blue tag is a household with a Bottle Drop account. So you can see the density of account holders. We sign up about 300 people every single day. We credit about 20,000 bags per day, at least during the summer. We're a little bit lower right now. And statewide, about 64% of all redemptions come through a Bottle Drop facility as opposed to through retail. That's a mixture of both green bag and RVMs. Interestingly, while the green bag program, it has 415,000 account holders, it still only represents about 27% of our overall volume. So the vast majority of the volume actually goes through the RVMs in the bottle drop redemption centers. And that's generally from professionals who are returning containers. Next slide, please. Where's the material go? So 100% of the plastic PET and HDPE all ends up at ORPET, which is a facility that we co-own in St. Helens. We send all of our bales there, and it's washed and flaked right at ORPET in St. Helens, Oregon. It does about 30 million pounds a year. The glass, 100% of that is shipped to Owens, Illinois, just down the street from us near the Portland airport, and made into new bottles, including our refillable bottles, which I'll mention in a moment. And then all of the aluminum is shipped domestically into either Kentucky or Alabama or a few other places. We don't really have a closer place that will accept it. But everything is processed domestically, and the glass and plastic is all processed 100% in Oregon, leading to Oregon jobs and really high quality material stream that producers really like. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. I thought I had some refillable information on here, but we also have a refillable bottle program that we launched in 2018. We have a standardized industry standard bottle that we distribute to breweries in Oregon. We're currently doing about 1 million units a year. Breweries buy the bottles the same way that they buy any other bottle. And then we collect them out of the stream and we wash them, sanitize them, and then sell them back to the brewery. And that whole process is built on the system that we've created. And we feel it's an example of the stewardship the industry can bring to the beverage environment by creating a centralized system to wash industry standard bottles and create a statewide refillable program. We've had a lot of success in that. A lot of great breweries are members, and it's something we've been very proud of. So thanks again for your time, and be happy to take, I guess we're not doing questions, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to contact me.
Jules, thank you so much. I can tell that you were expecting a couple of videos, and I'm thinking that with your permission, we can put some links in our next weekly headline so that everybody here can have access to those. We'll put an announcement and a link, and everybody can access those videos. I think they're also on your website. Is that true, Jules?
They are. They're also on our YouTube channel, which is fascinating if anybody wants to get on an OBRC YouTube channel. But I will send those links as well, and hopefully folks can take a look. I highly recommend Seamus Gets a Fish if you want to check out a fun video.
Excellent. Thank you, Jules. Well, next we're introducing our next speaker, who is Eric Winter. He is Senior Manager of Product Marketing at Clink. He has 20 years experience developing and deploying technical programs to delight customers. Originally a product manager for leading e-commerce companies, Eric has led both technical and customer-facing projects at multinational publicly traded companies such as TD Bank, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, IDEX Laboratories, and at smaller startups. Great. Eric serves as the lead for Clink's licensed partners to oversee project schedules, operational KPIs, and reporting. And Eric, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. This has been a great event, and I'm super impressed with how smoothly it's all working. So thank you.
Hey, don't jinx us, Eric.
I'm not going to jinx us, but thank you for convening all these people and moving the conversation forward. So the customer is king. I want to talk a little bit about this presentation. In a nutshell, I want to talk about the impact that customer experience and convenience make towards delivering high recycling rates. And I want to drill down on what makes good customer experience when it comes to container recycling. Next slide, please. So let me give you a 30-second intro of Clink. Clink is a technology company. Our technology is behind Bag Drop in the US, and we license our technology to bag drop operators throughout the country. We're also an operator of a program in Maine and New York that helps people redeem their containers. We process a couple 100 million containers a year, and that serves sort of as an R&D lab for advancing the art of a program that delivers a good customer experience. Next slide. So our program's a bag drop program. Bag drop, Jules did a great job. Thank you, Jules, for bringing it to life. Bag drop is a program that makes it so that a customer can drop off a bag of containers as opposed to individual containers. They can drop the bag and go. So it saves them a heck of a lot of time, and it makes it a much better customer experience. You know, generally speaking, we've seen some great examples from Jeff and Jules of redemption centers that are very nice, but that's not always the case. In a lot of places in the country, the redemption process or the redemption product is a terrible product. It's a terrible experience. It's loud, it's smelly, it's sticky, and I think that's a really important aspect. It's also slow, which is hugely important. And bag drop's one way you can change all of that. And the point of this presentation is to talk about that and to talk about the impact of that change. Again, the customer's king. So if you're not serving the customer, you may not be getting the most benefit from your program. There are some people that will redeem containers regardless of the customer experience, you know, whether it's for strong environmental commitments or they have financial needs, they'll redeem their containers. But there's also a huge population that won't recycle if it's not convenient or pleasant. Next slide. So let's talk conceptually about what drives recycling and redemption. It's very, very simple. In order for people to participate in a redemption program, the benefits need to outweigh the costs. And so it's important that we all think about how we can tip this scale. Next slide. So I want to drill in a little bit and talk about the first half on how we can increase the benefits. So the way we see it, there's two major benefit categories, and money's one of them. But the other one is positive feelings, and that's where we focus a lot of time and energy. How do we drive more positive feelings? It can be a good feeling of doing something good for the environment. It could be a good feeling about teaching financial responsibility to your kids. There are a lot of different paybacks for participating in a redemption program. Next slide. So we focus on the positive feeling side, and specifically we work on education and the celebration of recyclers. Go ahead, next slide. I have a couple of things here that bring this alive a little bit. So you really have to keep in mind what are the motivations of those that are participating in a program. Some people are participating in bottle redemption for financial reasons. Some people are thinking about the environmental impacts. And so to the extent you can, you want to motivate people by getting the right message to the right person at the right time. And so here are a few examples from some of our digital touch points. We have a section on our kiosks and on our website when people log into their accounts to talk about the environmental impact of their recycling activity. We break it down into terms they can understand. Talk about the impact of the recycling that they do. And then conversely, on the right-hand side, we have examples of, here are some of the financial benefits. Here's what you can do with the money. Here are people who are doing the redemption program, and here are the benefits that they're receiving. Next slide. So now let's move on to the decreasing costs, to decrease the cost for the customers. Again, there's a bunch of different categories. The cost for the customer, for the participant, is their time, their effort, their comfort levels, and potentially risk. But I want to talk mainly about the time. Time's an easy one to quantify. There's huge opportunities here. We all need to focus on how to make recycling easier and less time consuming for people. Because the benefits are not just incremental, like 5% improvements. You can make profound differences in the recycling behavior if you can cut down the amount of time it takes for people to transact. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, these next few slides, I'm going to talk about some ways that we can make the recycling more convenient. And to do that, we break it down into the elements of the redemption process. There's container collection, which is when people collect the stuff in their house, whether it's in their kitchen or elsewhere. They might have to move it, touch it a few times, eventually bag it or put it in something so that they can transport it. There's the transport itself, which is bringing it from their home to some place where it can be redeemed. And then there's the redemption transaction. So you add up the time it takes in each of those different places and you come up with the total time that it takes to redeem the container. Next slide. So now we can look at some opportunities for reducing that time. So one that we're very excited about, and Jules spoke to it, is if you locate the redemption node, the redemption depot, at a common stop location, you can reduce the time cost to the customer for the redemption process. They don't have to drive to a different place. They don't have to make a special trip. They're going there anyhow. So you're reducing that time. Next slide. And beyond that, if you can lower the transaction costs, make it much more efficient to redeem the containers, you can cut off even more time. So with common stop locations and bag drop, for example, you can lower the total time to something like 6.5 minutes. So great, that's cool. We all want to lower the amount of time it takes people to transact. But what does that really mean? Let's go to the next slide. I want to offer a model for sizing the impact. In this model, we start by calculating an hourly wage. If you have 5-cent deposit times 100 containers, that's $5. And if it takes 20 minutes, you can equate that to a $15 an hour wage. Next slide. Well, $15 an hour is $31,200 a year. And you ask yourself, what percentage of the population would find this return attractive? And it's about 24% of US households earn that much or less. You could argue that the 76% that don't earn that amount, that earn more than that amount, might not find this a good ROI. You might not find good cost benefit for redeeming. Next slide. So here's another scenario. If we can lower that time from 20 minutes to 6.5 minutes, you still get $5, 6.5 minutes, but then you're at $47 an hour. Next slide. So at $46 an hour, you then make it worthwhile by that same analysis for 68% of the households. This is huge. This is more than double. And now this is a simple analysis. It's just a model. But I think it's logical. It's valid. I would welcome other thought leaders to weigh in on this. But this is the sort of thinking that we need to drive more recycling. Next slide. And that's our fundamental value prop, is that convenience drives recycling. And we're passionate about driving more recycling behavior by driving a better customer experience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Eric. And thank you to all of the folks on the systems operations panel so far. We've got one more. We've got an example here coming up from Michigan. Nick knows that he's going last and that you've already seen a lot of pictures of different deposit take-back systems. So he's made his presentation a little bit shorter so as not to have repetition, but he's going to be talking about things that might be a little bit different in the Michigan system. So Nick, I'll introduce you now. You're Nick Kronsbein, and correct me on your last name, the pronunciation of your last name. He's Vice President and General Manager of UBCR in Michigan. UBCR is a key player in Michigan's successful beverage container deposit system, where their role is to collect, transport, and process empty beverage containers for Michigan's largest retailers. So Nick, please join us.
All right, excellent. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
Perfect. I'm not the first one to have that problem. So, well, I want to thank you and CRI for giving me a chance to speak on how the Michigan market works, first of all. The Michigan market is carbonated beverages and beer that are covered under the deposit law. And one of the things that I really wanted to, I don't want to duplicate from any of the previous three folks on system operations, is how efficiently Michigan has the return to retail model. One of the things that's different is we don't have the depot, we have the complete return to retail model. And that's been in place since 1978. In recent years, the return rate has dropped to, or 2018 was 89%, but since 1990, our overall return rate was 96%. There are multiple factors for that reducing rate, whether it's fraud, dime deposit amount, which hasn't changed since 1978, or the thriving economy, etc. So as Susan mentioned, I only have a few slides, so maybe I can get you back on schedule. Next slide, please. It's pretty much the circle of the dime. I guess I don't want to duplicate too many things. The one thing, the full circle is of the dime goes distributor, wholesaler, to the retailers, to the consumer, and then back to the retailers with the consumer bringing every container back. They get their deposit back from that. There is no handling fee in Michigan, so it is just the deposit. And on this slide, basically, I want to talk about the things on the left side that are in the blue circles. And so the material pickup piece is where UBCR has stepped in. For the first 20 years of the bottle bill, distributors picked up all of their materials, and they have to make sure it's not landfilled. With reverse vending machines coming into the Michigan market, retailers wanted a single company handling their returnable containers, and it was cleaner and to reduce their backroom space that was needed. So the RVMs provided retailers a huge return on investment as it reduced their current manual labor back in 1998 when UBCR was formed, and also reduced fraud in the backrooms. The soft drink and beer associations in the state took the lead as they saw the value in running a pickup program to help bring efficiencies to their operations as a whole, and ended up contracting UBCR. Which is a partnership between a local processor, Shupan Recycling, and a global company providing reverse vending machines, Tamra. So we're a partnership between Tamra and Shupan, and it's all private industry run. So next slide. It's a very simple graphic. On the left, distributors pick up from the smaller stores in Michigan, and on the right, UBCR picks up and takes to one of the two Shupan facilities. One's in Wixom, Michigan, the other is in Grand Rapids, basically following the population densities. So the side on the right, UBCR, I'm going to speak to. UBCR services over 60% of the return containers in only 580 locations. The rest of the 10,000 plus locations are still serviced by distributors, as they are lower volume, and distributors pick up empties when they deliver their full products. This creates enormous efficiencies for both retailers and distributors. The larger box stores see significant volume and have multiple RVMs to handle the volume, and continue to get the newest technology RVMs with the best compactors, and create the quickest way for consumers to get their deposit back. And rolling back to the Clink presentation, the speed of the Michigan market to get their deposits back is, I want to do some calculations now based on their model, because I think it's extremely fast. So in the Michigan market, the distributors are responsible for the material and also retain the ownership of material, no matter how it's picked up from the store. So that's one thing that's a little unique to the Michigan market from the previous presentations. So next slide, please. What happens to containers? First, it goes through an RVM. Tamra is the leading provider of RVMs in the Michigan market. There are two other reverse vending machine manufacturers that UBCR also services. So we're kind of a one-stop shop for a third-party pickup program for all reverse vending machine manufacturers. So Tamra is also a global supplier of sorting technology, as we saw in the Alberta presentation a couple minutes ago. In our system, the RVMs track each container and know the size, container type, and which distributor is responsible for that deposit of the container. Aluminum and plastic go through a compaction process in the RVM and dropped into a UBCR returnable packaging bin. Glass is sorted by the RVM in 2 different bins. Clear goes under one bin, and then the other is all the other colors that separate into another bin, maintaining the value of the different glass products. Clear obviously has more value than the brown or colored, which is green, blue, and amber. So then UBCR is responsible for picking up and transporting to a shoe pan facility where the containers go through a final sort stage to reduce any miscellaneous contaminants and sent to the appropriate mills for reuse in a new container. UBCR provides distributors with numerous ways to maintain accountability of their containers, from individual weights all the way through full bins coming back from retailers. We have created an automated process to handle the returnable packaging bins and streamline processing costs. We are constantly looking at ways to improve the processing system and the retailer experience through bin throughputs, washing and drying systems in their returnable packaging, along with many other things. In addition, UBCR is committed to running the most efficient operations for our distributor customers. For example, we moved to our entire fleet, which is 16 trucks, to compressed natural gas, which is a 35% greenhouse gas reduction from diesel trucks. The next generation CNG trucks are considered to be the near zero emissions, which we plan to move to in 2022, which is pretty exciting. We have also reduced our trailer weights through purchasing the newest, lightest weight trailers to maximize our fuel mileage. The Michigan system was developed as a result of the bottleable passing and how brand owners work together to make the system that complies with legislation and works for every private business involved with deposits, the retailers to each distributor. With all the discussion today, there's one other thing I'd like to reiterate is keeping the escheat money in the system is best. Michigan unfortunately had that years ago when we first passed it, and then the state took 75% of that to use for cleanup funds, and then the remaining 25% stayed with the retailers. So that's one thing that, looking at the national things, keeping things with the escheat money within the system is definitely helpful for any deposit return system. So with that, if there's anything else people would like as far as my contact info or anything about UBCR, our website is very easy to remember, ubcrllc.com. We have some videos out there and kind of how the system works and everything else like that. So with that, Susan, I appreciate the time you gave me, and I look forward to any questions, comments in the future. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much to our entire panel on systems operations, to Jeff and Jules and Eric and Nick. It's all very much appreciated, and I think you guys have done a fantastic job of giving all of the participants of this webinar a clear picture of what deposit systems look like, because there are a lot of people on this webinar who live in states where they don't have container deposits. So thank you very much for doing that. This next panel includes Kate Bailey and Martin Bork and Richard Valle. And we had originally put this together as a panel discussion. So we really had to pivot this week to shift it around and try to make it suitable for a webinar and not something where we were going to be sitting there face to face and having a question and answer period together in a discussion. So first I'll introduce Kate. Kate Bailey is the Policy and Research Director for EcoCycle based in Boulder, Colorado. EcoCycle is one of the largest recycling nonprofits in the world and has 44 years of hands-on experience in creating community infrastructure, policies, and programs to reduce waste and increase recycling. EcoCycle operates a single-stream material recovery facility through a public-private partnership with Boulder County and has a national reputation for producing clean, high-quality bales. Kate is an expert on best practices in creating zero-waste communities and has worked directly with local government, state legislators, citizens groups, business leaders, and brands to advance zero waste solutions as a critical step toward addressing our climate crisis. And I do want to also preface and mention that this entire panel of speakers are very special material recovery facilities operators because they are all part of mission-driven organizations. So with that, Kate, I'll turn it over to you to give us your introductory remarks.
Hi, Susan. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks to everyone on today's event. It's been fantastic and definitely put a smile on my face in an otherwise dark time. So thanks, everyone. As Susan mentioned in the intro, EcoCycle does run a single stream MRF. We are one of the oldest and largest nonprofits. So our mission is very much aligned with container deposit systems. We very much are, our heart and soul is resource conservation, reducing climate change. So in terms of where we see the world, we are super excited about this, but I have to say that in terms of being an operator, we run a curbside recycling program in a state that does not have a bottle bill. And so looking at all of the exciting stuff happening in other places, I have to say is a little terrifying from the operator perspective. I think it would mean a big change for our operations. And we, as an organization, want to make that change. We want to help be a voice in the recycling and the waste industry to say, this is going to be a little scary and it's going to be a little challenging, but this is the right thing for us to do. And this is how MRFs and curbside recycling programs can transition in states that don't have programs. So we're hoping to be that bridge from where we are now to where we hope to be.
Excellent. Kate, I wanted to ask you, how do you see a container deposit law fitting into the broader need for packaging reduction and packaging management?
We have come under a lot of criticism as an industry over the last several years, as several people have noted. And so we've really been stepping up into that narrative to say, hey, wait a minute, recycling has some challenges and there are a lot of things that need to be improved, but don't just toss it aside. It has a lot of value and has a lot of things that should be improved. But at the same time, I think what's a more exciting part of the conversation is that recycling is not going to solve all of our problems with climate change or resource depletion. And so really excited about some of the conversations about refillables happening and really looking to ensure that some of the commitments made by brands and other industries to increase recycling are also paired with ways that we are reducing potentially container generation or use of plastics. We can't just keep going on the trajectory we are. And so we really need all strategies on the table, and we see this as an important part of that, but certainly a lot more needs to happen as well with the waste reduction side.
Excellent. I wanted to sort of go back a little bit and also ask you to tell us a little bit more about your facility and your operation. What you're doing there is really special.
Yeah, so we operate in so let me step back. 1976, EcoCycle started one of the first 20 curbside recycling programs. So we've really been working with curbside recycling since the beginning. We operated our own facility until 2001 when Boulder County built at the time, state-of-the-art MRF. It was dual stream and has since converted to a single stream. So we operate that in a public-private partnership. So the facility is owned by the county and operated by EcoCycle. Our mission is really to get those materials to highest and best use. We are really invested in education. So we have some of the cleanest materials coming into our system, and we have some of the lowest residue coming out. And that has really been proven to be a smart business strategy in the last couple of years, as we've been able to weather the storm a little bit better than some other organizations. So we really do have a good model, and Boulder as a whole does pretty well at recycling. We have a 57% recycling rate in the city. which we're pretty proud of, but we exist in a state that is one of the worst. So it may come to a surprise to some people, but Colorado has only a 17% recycling rate. So we're terrible as a region, and we're really looking to be a leader and to be a model in helping Colorado transition out of the dismal dump that we're in now. And we're looking at and having legislators come to us and say, we hear bottle deposits are working elsewhere. What does that mean for Colorado? And certainly appreciate all of the great stuff I'm learning today in terms of what that transition might look like.
Great. Can you also talk about your local glass end markets?
We are in, so Colorado, one of our challenges is that we are kind of in the desert in the middle of the country. And so we don't have a lot of end markets for materials, and we end up shipping California, South Carolina, Midwest, like we're shipping far, and that's a real challenge and cost on our programs. We do, however, have a great success story in glass recycling. We have Rocky Mountain Bottling Company, which produces bottles for Coors right here in Colorado. We also have an Owens, Illinois plant. So we have an insatiable demand for glass bottles within the state. So all of our glass is recycled here within a 30-mile radius. It's really a great story, but our industry is also struggling. We have a glass reprocessor who came in a couple of years ago, and they can't get enough glass. In fact, Rocky Mountain Bottling ships in a lot of their glass from Michigan because it's high quality and has a great program. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. So we talk a lot to our legislators about glass being a great example of how we can have recycling businesses here in Colorado, but we really lack the collection infrastructure. We have a lot of Front Range communities that don't have curbside recycling. We have a lot of rural areas. So we really have a lot of collection challenges. And so I think that a bottle deposit system could really help us address the collection side of things, getting more of the containers from residents and businesses, and that in turn will drive investment in end markets here in Colorado, in our region, driving a lot more economic benefit from recycling as well. So I'm really hopeful that we can get a win-win in that case.
So that was going to be my last question to you. So, tell me if you've already answered it, but the last question I wanted to ask you was, how do you see, if there was a deposit law in Colorado, how would you see it benefiting your city and your residents? And you talked about the region as well.
Yeah, we really, I appreciate Sarah from Eunomia had some great slides earlier about the benefits of the system. And I think one of our challenges here in Colorado is we don't have municipal trash and recycling collection for the most part. It's a very privatized open market system. So there's a lot more risk on the private industry and a lot fewer gains by the public sector in terms of how you quantify the benefits. And so, I think we really need so we've been stumbling for a number of years. And so I think that this is a really exciting opportunity to look at both. This is a way to increase collection as well as a way to increase the business demand. Colorado does not, we're not a leader on policies like this. We've definitely been looking to a lot of the other states. But I think you can't just slap the program that's in other states onto our existing infrastructure. I know as a MRF, it's going to be a little scary moving forward, but we're very interested in doing that. And a lot of our communities are eager to make change. People are talking a lot about this, but just need some help moving forward.
Excellent. Well, I want to bring Martin into the conversation now. Because, and I know that you two talk and compare notes and ideas. And so first I'll introduce Martin, Executive Director of the Ecology Center. He's a renowned recycling industry expert who has led the Berkeley Ecology Center since 2000. Under his leadership, the Ecology Center operates the nation's first and longest running curbside recycling program and pioneers zero waste policy solutions at the local level. Martin has been a voice helping to keep recycling true to its original values and challenging the myths of the collect, sort, export model. And Martin, I'd like to bring you in, so welcome.
Thanks for having me on the conference schedule.
Yeah, and I know we went back and forth this weekend on these slides, so if there's any assist that you need from me on these slides, just let me know.
Yeah, just ask for people's forgiveness. We had a change in format here, so the slides were a little last minute, but wanted to give folks just a little summary of the California bottle bill, how it works out here. We feel, at least from a curbside recycler's perspective, that there isn't a conflict between curbside collection and deposit systems, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Next slide. So just to let people know, we were the first curbside program in the country, started in 1973, and today we operate a modern split cart dual stream program. We analyzed single stream and felt that in the end, from a collections perspective and education perspective, it really wasn't going to achieve our goals when we switched from tubs to carts. We did get a huge bump in tonnage in switching from tubs to carts, like most single stream programs, but we were able to maintain very low contamination rates and very high quality materials as a result. Next slide. We also use split bodied trucks. So much of our investment is in the cart and the truck, and much less investment in the MRF, the needs for physical sorting in the MRF, and we do a lot of our sorting manually. Next slide. Just a quick shot of where we started. You know, workers' comp case waiting to happen, I guess. But, you know, we started very grassroots, and the goal was always to remove valuable materials from the waste stream and to prevent destruction of our natural environment, save energy, water, etc. So our values, you know, are core, and we share those with EcoCycle and the other nonprofit and mission-based recyclers, where the mission is the purpose of doing this operation. And we're all in conversation, working together, building an alliance of mission-based recyclers called AMBER, and really trying to, in this moment of great challenge to the recycling industry, help to get us back to those values and roots. Next slide. In 1987, we fought the California bottle bill because it eliminated a really robust bottle reuse program and deposit system that existed to that point. And bottlers were really looking to switch out of glass in particular and into plastic. And the goal for them was to scale up and be able to eliminate all the collection and washing and refilling at the local level and build out really massive bottling centers that they could then distribute from more widely. And of course, shipping glass long distances is cost prohibitive. So we felt like that was undermining the local economy and you know, moving outside of the reduce, reuse, recycle hierarchy and putting recycling at the top and reuse at the bottom. And so we fought the bottle bill. And you know, another reason we were very concerned about it is that it was going to push all these bottles that had previously been being washed and refilled into the recycling program and have tremendous impacts at the curbside level. And some of the things that California did at that time was to ensure that curbside recyclers could be compensated for container deposit systems that are in curbside collection programs. Next slide. So just some quick summary, and thanks to Susan for sharing some of her slides with me to be able to share with you all. But just, you know, top level key elements. It's, as far as I know, the only state-run program. It's operated within Department of Conservation and CalRecycle. It's $1 billion a year program. All the redemption centers are independently operated. There have been some companies that operate dozens or even hundreds of locations, and they basically operate off of the scrap value of the material that they get back at the redemption centers, and bottle bill payments, which are various, and I'll get into those. It was called California's Compromise because it has some shared responsibility in it. The bottlers do pay. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. And this is an area where we think there could be vast improvement in California's system and increasing the amount that the bottlers pay and making it more of an EPR kind of structure, at least sharing the financial costs. Retailers and they collect the deposits and they ensure that there's a buyback center. It's supposed to be within a half a mile. If there isn't a buyback within a half a mile, a redemption center within a half a mile, they're supposed to pay $100 per day as a fine. And some do, as they've closed, and we'll talk about the closures. Some of them just suck that up as cost of doing business. It ends up being $35,000 a year from the grocers, but mostly they've been able to get exemptions from the state, and it's pretty easy to do. In fact, it's felt pretty rubber stamp as there's been a crisis in this situation where the scrap value has gone down so much. The consumers pay the deposit, 5 or 10 cents, depending on the size, and that covers 98% of the program, including all the administration and different fees that are paid. The state makes the recyclers whole. So for materials that don't pay for themselves on scrap, the program compensates them for the difference between the cost to recycle the material and the scrap value that they get for it, because the deposit obviously goes back to the customer. So there are various ways that happens. There's the deposits themselves, which go from the retailer to the recycler to the customer. And then there's processing fees, handling fees, and administrative fees. There's actually a longer list than that, but in summary, there's different ways that the state, that the program makes recyclers whole. And that mechanism, that system, is what has fallen apart in the last few years. It has some structural problems, and it also has short-term or shorter term, I should say, market problems with it. But curbside programs get redemption deposits based on a commingled rate. So the state does statewide audits of single stream materials and figures out roughly based on their composition how much of it is CRV redemption value, and then the recyclers get paid, the curbside programs get paid for that material as well. And then you can, and is quite frequently the case, run a drop-off program or buyback program, sorry, at your MRF and combine the curbside, MRFing, and buyback all under one roof, which is the situation we have here in Berkeley. Like EcoCycle, we are a nonprofit organization running a recycling program on city property. So we have a public-private relationship with the, partnership with the city of Berkeley. And the MRF is operated by Community Conservation Centers, also known as Berkeley Recycling, another nonprofit organization. So they run the buyback program as well as a drop-off location and some other waste reduction programs. Next slide. So just some quick summaries about the money in the program. And again, thanks to Susan, it's $1.3 billion a year in deposits. It's 1 million tons. It's a really big, very successful overall program. Next slide. 2 out of every beverage containers in the country are recycled through this program. We have 10% of the population. We're recycling 20% of the material. So that speaks to how successful this is, and of course, how poorly some other states are able to, without bottle bills, are able to collect these beverage containers. Next slide. So it's about 19 billion bottles and cans. And the 2 containers that dominate, you can see the tons there, are aluminum and PET in terms of units, with glass being the sort of far third In terms of units, if you go to the far right on this table, you'll see that the flip side is opposite, and it's upside down in terms of tons, glass dominating in terms of tons, with PET and then aluminum coming up behind that, near 1 million tons of material overall. So on a tonnage basis, 23% of the nation's beverage bottles being recycled. Next slide. You can kind of quickly grok this. I think maybe we'll just move through it because there's a lot of detail, but there are a number of different payments out to cities. There's payments for administration, there's payments to secondary processors, there's payments for distributors, administrative fees, et cetera. Just to note that, in addition to the deposits that are paid, there is a significant amount of revenue left over that's used for all the administration and for making recyclers whole. Next slide. In terms of the revenue, you can see that the vast majority is redemption. And then you can see that the processing fees that are paid for by beverage companies is a tiny fraction, like 1%. So next slide. The penalty assessments are for grocery stores that aren't complying. In terms of expenditures, 1.3 billion, the vast majority, 80%, goes out in redemption value. And then processing payments to recyclers, the administration payments, other distributions. The actual administration of the program is about 3% of the total cost. So actually pretty lean considering the amount of money and the amount of transactions and the amount of retailers and everything that's involved. Next slide. And so the big problem that we've had, can you go back one? Yeah. The big problem that has happened is that the way that the payments to recyclers happen is that the state takes an assessment of the, averages out in various ways the cost of recycling, and then compares that to the scrap value and pays the recyclers the difference. And with the crash in recycling markets and the sort of steady decline in the scrap value, it's meant that it takes 2 years for the state to catch up with that. And so it's very slow to respond and hasn't ever through this market crash caught up with the pricing. So what that's meant is that, next slide, is that there's been a difference between the amount of payments that are made to recyclers and the cost of doing recycling statewide. And this graph just shows the cumulative net gap between what recyclers needed to stay whole and what they've been paid by the state. And this is the primary reason, or the current market basis reason, why so many buybacks have gone out of business in the last several years. Next slide. So here's what's happened with buyback centers. We peaked out at roughly 2,600 statewide, and then saw just steady drop-offs as the market crashed and this structural problem existed. Susan's explained to me there's also a more structural long-term problem, which is based on how they calculate the cost of recycling, that is sort of a downward spiral, an ever lowering calculation. So there's some bad math that eventually, if you just keep playing it out over time, squeezes the recyclers so tight that they can't operate with or without these market problems. Next slide. And you see the opposite result, which is number of customers being served per each site. And we've seen this here locally where just so many sites have closed that the remaining ones are basically operating in a subsidized fashion here in Berkeley, because the city of Berkeley feels it's really important to continue to operate them. But they have to be attached to something else. They can't be standalone buyback centers, or they're just going to close. And so that means that the number of people using these existing sites has grown significantly as well. We do about $1.2 million in payments out of this facility here. And that's, you know, ostensibly for a city of 120,000 people, but next slide. You see a map here, and this is just straight off of, you know, Google, where are the supermarkets, and there are probably, you know, about 20 big ones within maybe 10 or 15 miles. And then there's all these smaller ones, you see the dots, and this doesn't include the pharmacies that are also now selling lots of California Redemption Value containers. But if you look at the number of recycling facilities, drop-off centers, sorry, buyback centers, next slide, you'll see there's only 4 of us. So, you know, there used to be probably a dozen. And this means that folks who are collecting on the shoreline and public spaces and taking materials in shopping carts or by foot, by bike, which is how a lot of our stuff gets here, you know, they're having to go great distances, or if they're bars and restaurants and they're taking it in for redemption, they've got to drive quite far. And then the volumes have just really gone up in these locations. So next slide. One thing the bottle bill does here is support 3-color sorting. We actually color sort our glass on site, and you know, people think we're crazy for doing that, but actually it pencils out because of the incentives that the bottle bill has. For those of you who understand this, if you're trying to do bottle-to-bottle recycling, you can't take a brown bottle and make it into a clear bottle. So this actually facilitates much more closed loop recycling. And we're lucky to have strategic materials not too far down the road, down the freeway from us. So again, this is, because of its weight, one of the most local and closed loop cycles that we have. These bottles come back to us through our microbreweries in the local area and through Anheuser-Busch and others more regionally. Next slide. So I just wanted to, in the last minute here, talk about some of the pros and cons of a state-run program. And some of these maybe are just about California's program, but curbside programs are made whole. So we don't actually see a huge problem with losing material to deposit system, or because we get paid for it if it comes, and it gets sorted by the customer if it doesn't. So, you know, we're able to ask the customers to sort it all out, and it comes in very clean. So it actually it upgrades some of our materials that are sorted through the MRF. You can combine the buyback program and a curbside program on the same site and facility, and that has efficiencies in it because you can have an independent buyback. It's not state run or privately run. The unredeemed funds benefit the recycling system overall, so they stay sort of within the loop. And there's, like I said, independent recyclers. So if you transition, you can keep those independent recyclers. There's no stranded assets. You're not putting people out of business in starting up a proprietary state or cooperative or other system. There's high transparency and high accountability. It's a state program. We have all the visibility into the system. Of course, you know, we always want more, but it's very visible, very accountable. Some of the challenges are that the legislative framework lags behind the markets, and we're really feeling the pain on that right now. There is some hard to change bad math in this public policy structure. So getting changes through the public policy is, you know, not as clear cut and can be manipulated by various industries through the political process. And so rather than having that operate through a very business framework, it's through public policy and government framework, which comes with its own sets of pros and cons. So that's it. That's what I had to share. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely great, and thank you for making a really huge pivot from what we were planning to do a mere week ago. Thank you for that great presentation. So now I'll go on to introduce Richard. Richard Valle has served as Alameda County Supervisor of District 2 since June 11th, 2012. He was elected in November 2012 and is focused on collectively working with the community to identify solutions to longstanding issues that impact our communities. Richard served as a Union City Council member for 13 years from 1997 to 2010. And Richard is the founder and president of TriSaid Community Recycling, California's largest nonprofit recycling company that employs at-promise youth and provides union jobs for local residents. In addition to its recycling collection services in the city of Union City and the city of Hayward, TriSaid also operates a buyback redemption center at their facility in Union City. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. I see you've already put up the slide, but let me make a public announcement. The city and county of San Francisco, Alameda County, and several other counties just declared a state of emergency with regard to the coronavirus. A shelter-in-place alert goes into effect at midnight this evening for the next 2 weeks. And so forgive me, I'm distracted by that action at the moment as a county supervisor. But let me get to this first slide. And Martin did cover a lot of the areas that I was going to cover about the California bottle bill. Let me tell you a little bit about TriSaid first. TriSaid was founded in January of 1980 after the assassination of the police chief in Union City, which is where I grew up. This is a community development corporation, and we selected recycling as a growth industry back in the late 70s when we saw that the Ecology Center in Berkeley was doing something unique that provided entry-level jobs to youth who were at risk, or what we called at promise. From that, we created California's largest nonprofit recycling operation. We own 5 acres in Union City, and we operate a curbside recycling program for 2 cities, city of Hayward and the city of Union City. We employ 72 people, and they are affiliated with the Teamsters Union Local 70, which is based in Oakland. So we have a full benefit package that is very generous for our drivers, our sorters, with the exception of the buyback youth who work in the recycling center. And we have a training program that lasts for 18 months where kids cycle through and get some special training. And we push them back into academia, into training through the building trades. We have a affiliation with the building trades of Alameda County, where kids can be trained at the Cypress Mandela Training Center in the building trades because of the great boom in business here in the Bay Area. There's a shortage of apprenticeships in electricians, carpenters, and other crafts where these kids can create a future for themselves. So that's the genesis of TriSaid. We continue to be struggling because of the California bottle bill and the way things are running. This first slide shows you that in, let me jump to that slide. If you live in Los Angeles County or Riverside County or Kern County or in San Diego County, you can reasonably drive to find a recycling center or redemption center in your general area. If you look at these numbers, the combined total population for these counties is about 18, almost 19 million people. The number of recycling centers serving them is 656. The ratio of 1 recycling center for every 28,914 people. That's what you wind up when you do the numbers. By contrast, the chart shows that if you live in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, and San Francisco County, and San Mateo County, which is in Northern California, you are less likely to find a recycling center because there are fewer available. The combined total for these counties is a little bit over 5 million. The number of recycling centers serving them is 36. So that's a ratio of 1 recycling center per 146,032 people. This means you'll have to drive or travel farther to redeem your California redemption containers. And chances are the lines at the recycling center will be longer, and so will be your wait, as much as a half hour or more. The next slide shows you our volume back on Saturday, February 2019. That was February 23rd. That was the last Saturday in February. 1 year later, after the closure of redemption centers, hundreds of them around us, Tri said in February 2020, the numbers for aluminum cans tripled. The numbers for redemption glass went up 5 times. And the number for PET redemption plastic containers tripled. The number of customers more than doubled, and so did the lines in the wait for customers, and so did the frustration of our customers expressing anger that the closest redemption center closest to them had gone out of business. They complained about the long lines and the gas that they were burning while waiting in line, but none of them left because a lot of our customers really depend on that redemption money for their subsistence and living. Let's go to the next slide, Susan, please. Let me move to the issue of adding wine and liquor bottles. Earlier today, I heard a gentleman speak from the Glass Recycling Coalition saying that they support deposit laws and that glass is becoming more and more recyclable. I looked at the list on the slide that he presented, and I saw Gallo at the top of the list as a member of the Glass Recycling Coalition. In the state of California, Gallo is the biggest obstacle when it comes to adding wine and liquor bottles to the redemption law. Susan, I don't know if there's another element of this slide that needs to come up. There you go. And bring up the other one, please. There should be one more. There you go. The Ernest and Julio Gallo plant in Modesto generates 200,000 tons of glass for Gallo, which is used for distilled spirits and wine bottles. And they go under several names. So I'm curious if there are a lot of glass processors available, the value for recycled glass versus the cost of processing, the point of collection, coupled with the transportation cost to get glass to manufacturers is cost prohibitive. And unless the wine industry and the liquor industry allows those containers to be part of the redemption value system, it continues to be a burden on us recyclers because there's no value to their material. It is recyclable, however, there's no value or incentive for us as recyclers to take their material. So I'd like to work with the Glass Recycling Coalition to make sure that they are responsible and that they do their fair share, to make sure that they cover the collection of wine and liquor bottles at the curbside, or preferably in recycling centers, because as Martin's slide showed previously, when glass is separated by color, it has higher value. But when it's commingled with single stream collection at the curb, the value diminishes very quickly. And in fact, a huge amount of that glass goes to curbside because it's been contaminated by the other material in the truck. So we've always said it, and we've said it before, that we believe the wine and liquor industry have a moral obligation to do the right thing. They need to step up and help us make recycling of their packaging more economically viable. And we want to help them to make sure that the public understands that they're doing the right thing. One more item to note is that Coors and Miller beer bottles are manufactured in Colorado. Now, California has recycled content legislation that should apply to all manufacturers outside the state of California. If the product is imported into the state, then its packaging should be covered under California minimal recycling content law. We know that these bottles, Miller and Coors, are not necessarily made out of recycled glass. We believe that the public is going to start demanding that these containers and all containers should include minimal content in their product and in their packaging. So we'd like to make sure that the state of California covers all of its bases by making sure that recycled content law applies to products made outside the state, but imported into the state, especially if they're under the California Redemption Value Program. The last point on this is that, again, we want to work with the wine and liquor industry in the state of California to do the right thing. Next slide, please. We agree with our union workers here at TriSet, and so does the leadership of the Teamsters Union who represents them, that the inclusion of distilled spirits and wine bottles in the expansion of the California Bottle Bill is the right thing to do for Californians and workers in the recycling industry. We've always been in lockstep with our union workers and the people who do all of the sorting and all of the collection. Their interests are our interest, and their interest is in the public's interest. So we would, again, this is an olive branch to the wine industry. Please join us in trying to save the environment and do the right thing. We know you want to go green, but we want to make sure that you go the full measure of being green. Next slide, please. This is going to be the last slide because I have to jump to a call with the county about the state of emergency that's just been declared here in Northern California. We cannot forget that we have obligations to our environment and to the people who depend on us for their livelihood and in many cases for subsistence, to simply survive day by day. We should respect the dignity of life and all human beings. So one of the questions that I have for our county when we shutter in place is, will our buyback recycling center have to shut down? And if it does, these are the people who are going to suffer the most. These are the people who salvage for a living and make their living out of recycling. And there's a lot of people in government who would like to ignore these people. We don't, because they're critically important to our infrastructure, and they represent the tip of the spear when it comes to recycling. Our world is better served when we have respect for life and everybody around us. So by the mere fact that we create convenience for ourselves through consumerism, consumerism creates waste. By the very nature of the lack of concern, we are not asking ourselves questions before we buy. And the question should be, do we really need more? Shouldn't we take care of what we have? Shouldn't we be doing all that we can to reduce the disruption to our environment? So we shouldn't be afraid to improve our industry by challenging all of us and by bringing the conversation not just to elected officials, but also to the people who profit from the sale of materials and goods with packaging that needs to be captured and reused. So let's do this for the general good of all living beings that inhabit the earth and the larger ecosystem, and the demands that we all have to step up to a higher degree of concern. Thank you, Susan, for allowing us to be a part of this.
Richard, thank you so much for being here today. I don't want to make this go on too long because I really just want you to go. You have what you have to do is so much more important than this webinar, but I can't believe that you made time for this today, and made time to present and completely change your presentation over the last week, because there's been so much turmoil, but you've had a huge responsibility that the rest of us don't have. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Well, it was my intention to show the break slide. I will come up with a way to do that. We've now moved into our 10-minute break. And so we'll stop the program for 10 minutes and come back in 10 minutes with our next speaker. Thank you, everyone.